Max Verstappen is the reigning world champion from 2021 and is on a path to breaking multiple records this season. Although he is well ahead in the fight for the Drivers' Championship and his team is dominating the Constructors' Championship, Verstappen has brought a huge revolution to the game. He debuted at just 16 years of age, and with his arrival in the sport, everybody knew that there was something in him that just made the racing sport a better place. Want to find out more about Verstappen's revolution in F1? Stick around with us until the end of this video. Verstappen entered the sport in Toro Rosso, as we mentioned earlier in this video, at the age of 16. He has entered straight from F3, which is something phenomenal, and not many drivers have done it in the past. Some of the drivers that did do this, however, are Bottas, Ricciardo, Raikkonen, etc. But what was even more impressive about Verstappen was his debut in Red Bull. His teammate in Toro Rosso at that time was Carlos Sainz Jr. It was well known that Verstappen had issues with his temper, and he was constantly swearing and throwing tantrums at his team for things not being the way he wants them to be. Nevertheless, after one full year in Toro Rosso, in which he debuted in 2015 at the Australian GP, and just 4 races in 2016, he debuted for Red Bull. He replaced Daniel Kvyat, the driver that took his girlfriend from afterward in 2020, and in his first race in Barcelona, Verstappen was able to win ahead of the Ferrari of Raikkonen. Both of the Mercedes drivers crashed, which was a huge help to him, but nevertheless Verstappen set a case for one of the best young drivers, and it was more than evident that the future is bright for him. Max Verstappen was praised by Martin Brundle at the time, who is also an ex-F1 driver, and said that Red Bull did find a gem in Max. Verstappen is the son of an ex-F1 driver too, Jos Verstappen, and although his father changed more teams than his son, his resume isn't something that he can brag along with. But when his son decided to pursue a career in racing at a young age, Jos retired from the sport and decided to invest all of his knowledge and intel to make his son a formidable F1 driver someday. Rest assured that he did succeed in this mission, as Verstappen has revolutionized the sport in every aspect possible. To show how special Verstappen's win with Red Bull was, only one driver prior to him managed to achieve this feature in 2010, and that is Fernando Alonso. Both of them were able to win the first race on his team debut, which must have put a lot of hopes in Verstappen's challenge in becoming an F1 future champion. On top of that, Verstappen ended with 4 podiums and 6 top finishes in his first season with Red Bull, only going to show that he is here to stay for a long time. Prior to Verstappen's arrival in Formula 1, Red Bull put their primary focus on Daniel Ricciardo to be the next big thing for the team after the departure of Sebastian Vettel. The Aussie had replaced Mark Webber, and in 2014, Vettel and Ricciardo shared a seat in Red Bull. However, with Verstappen's arrival in 2016, it became evident that a 16-year-old boy does indeed hold much more potential than Ricciardo for the number 1 place in the team. It took Ricciardo 3 full seasons to understand that, as in 2019, he left Red Bull apparently because the team made a deal with Honda and he didn't trust the reliability of the engine since the Japanese manufacturer wasn't really famous for its collaboration with McLaren. But on top of that, there is something that Verstappen did that really amazed and changed the course of F1, and some of it changed the rules in F1 too. Verstappen entered the sport prior to him having a driving license, and he had to take courses and classes for driving a regular car after being in the sport for 2 years. This is why the F1 sport brought a rule that a driver cannot participate in the most elite championship if he doesn't have 18 years of age. This alteration was brought so that the F1 world won't ever encounter the next Max Verstappen, and his world record of being the youngest ever driver remains intact. When you're that young entering the sport, and you do have a chance to prove yourself in one of the best teams on the grid, you do get the perks of breaking some records, such as youngest ever to lead a lap, youngest ever to lead a race, youngest ever to qualify on pole position, youngest ever to win multiple races, youngest ever with the fastest lap, etc. It's well known that Verstappen has made himself famous in Interlagos too, as he completed an amazing drive in the rain to finish P3 after running at the back of the grid at some point. The overtakes he did on the wet part of the tracks was something that kept all team bosses amazed, and the F1 world was yet again reassured that Verstappen is the next big thing for the sport. Apart from the age factor that Verstappen initially brought to the sport that made the FIA react, there is one more thing that made the governing body stick its fingers inside the rules of the sport. During the 2016 Spa GP, Verstappen braked and made Raikkonen move on the outside while driving over 200 km per hour at the Kemmel Straight. This was perceived as a very aggressive move by Verstappen, and it was something that the FIA later prohibited as they implemented the rule that drivers are prohibited from braking while defending. All of this was because Verstappen was pushing some boundaries in his first year in Red Bull. Talk about an influencer, right? Verstappen is indeed a driver that did some costly mistakes, like the collision with Ocon in 2018, when the Frenchman tried to unlap himself from Verstappen because he was on much fresher tyres. They collided in Interlagos, which resulted in Verstappen losing his P1 to P2 to Hamilton, and he did spend the 2018 season frequently crashing or not ending races due to engine reliability issues. Nevertheless, Verstappen has brought some freshness and aggressiveness to the sport that was nowhere to be seen after the Senna time. That is why most of the F1 experts are comparing Verstappen with Senna, and although Max is less accomplished than the Brazilian and does have some time to spend in the sport in order to be compared to him by achievements, the racing style is here and the similarities cannot be overlooked. Verstappen isn't stopping with his influence and the revolution in the sport, and the latest move done by the FIA was about the safety car restart. We know that Verstappen loved to park parallel to the leading car or the car he is following behind during the safety car restart. It was one of the things that allowed him to gain leverage over Hamilton in the last race in Abu Dhabi, as he is applying pressure on the leader to start driving faster and is trying to catch him off guard. From 2022, those kinds of restarts are prohibited, and now every driver has to line behind the driver in front of them, as those shenanigans with the parallel restarts are now in the past. However, 2022 is a season where Verstappen can break some records, such as the one with the most wins in a season that is currently being held by Vettel and Schumacher by 13. After Monza, Verstappen has 11 with 6 races to go, and it's highly likely that he'll win at least 3 of them because he doesn't have any competition as we speak. During the 2022 season, Verstappen was lined multiple times on the back of the grid, more precisely at P10, P14 and P7 during the Hungarian, Belgian and Monza GP. He was able to win all of those without any real challenge, and during the Belgian GP, Verstappen was able to take the lead in lap 12 and run ahead of Perez by more than 17 seconds. If this isn't revolutionary enough, then we really don't know what is. Verstappen is on pace to become one of the greatest drivers ever in the sport, and although he won his first championship with a lot of controversies, the same thing happened to Hamilton in 2008 when he won it by the mistake of Timo Glock ahead of him. Things happen for a reason, and in 2022, Verstappen is driving in a league of his own, which only goes to show that he does mean business. What do you think of the Flying Dutchman? Do you think he has what it takes to become one of the greats in the sport? Let us know in the comments below.